Hey, happy Saturday, everybody! How y'all doing? Hey, Rage, hey, Pseudo, are you guys ready to talk about game mods? I know at least one of you are.
I am very excited for this.
Pseudo definitely is. I can talk a little bit. Little bitty bit.
And hey, Board, hey, Nariel, hey, Raven, welcome to the table. Thanks again for that gift sub, Mr. Rage. All the rest of you lurkers, how's your weekend doing? How's everybody going? I hope you're better off than I am. I'm getting better, though. I'm on the mend. I'm feeling better, and I hope to be back to regular streams soon, but we haven't missed a panel, and it's not going to happen. Let's keep doing this. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. At least we're on the uptick. I'm excited. Because you got to play Yakuza soon.
Yes.
I am hyped to see that. And then Yakuza 2. And then
at some point in the distant future, Hollow Knight.
A lot of good games coming up.
Yes. And there will be a bit of a change to the game request system, so keep an eye out for that. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. I'm just going to make everyone panic and go, oh no, I have to spend my points. It's funny.
The point inflation is coming again.
So to get the chat rolling a little bit, let's just get it kicked off and started with the chat. What is everybody's favorite and or first game mod you can remember? Do you remember like a certain mod when you were a kid? Like, I played this game, but only with that mod.
First game mod, huh?
Wow, that for me, that dates me back to like Warcraft 3 map mods, because that was my jam.
My first is probably StarCraft.
Yeah, I'm thinking StarCraft as well. I did play a lot of use map settings maps.
I made them. That was where I got my start making them.
Well,
I worked on one of the Godzilla maps that a lot of people ended up playing iterations of, and a Resident Evil map that was pretty fun but never became very popular.
I think I played that, actually.
It's possible. It was out there. You'd have like the explosive guys popping out like the zombies, and you got to shoot them before they come to you. Just slowed their speed right down, gave them more health.
just totally reminded me of there's a Resident Evil mod for Killing Floor 1 that converts the wave, because if people play Killing Floor, it's like a wave system of the game. Like you have like certain amount of waves you need to survive, and they somehow modded it into an actual like campaign mission that you actually navigate this huge map. I have no idea how they did it, but it was really cool. You actually like go through the entire hive and out.
That's pretty cool.
That's actually sick.
So yeah, so maybe we should we'll start off with, what are game mods for people who don't know, and what is kind of modding in general. And
we also had a Half-Life 2 mod mention in the chat that nobody said anything about, but Half-Life 2 mods were totally a thing.
It was a whole thing.
Oh yeah.
Half-Life Source Engine just in general was just like the kind of breeding ground for mods for a long time. Game mods are basically just any modification of a game, whether it be if you're making changes to its scripting or changing up assets, or even just kind of like the core performance of how the game is. It's basically just any modification. I'd even argue even saying like you don't even have to actually change the game itself. I'd even say that, rule changes and even like house rules would apply as a game mod or a modification of the game.
That's a good one. Yeah, actually, I've got a good example of one of those too later on.
Yeah, like 007, a lot of people had, the custom way they play that. Banning of characters, banning of weapons, and even board games.
Hashtag fuck Oddjob.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Oddjob was always disallowed, but we went way beyond, and like there was specific level involved, limited weapons within the weapon limitation, even how you were allowed to use them was dictated. So it was fun.
Yeah. Condensed game mods are basically just, either improvements or just any tweaking that people do to the game. It's just you take your creativity and just kind of run with it. And video games and even board games before have always been kind of a great vessel for that. Like I was saying before, like the house rules and stuff like that. A lot of people with Monopoly, they'll play with like, if you land on free parking, you earn everything that's been put into the pot there. I don't think that's an official rule. That's usually just a common house rule, but that's still kind
That's
of
correct.
a
Yeah.
modification to the game. And it's
Yep.
something that, the developers, the creators, they put something out there and then people play it and they're like, you know what, it would be nice if it had, maybe this or maybe that. And, we're have the possibility to, make those changes. So that's kind of what game mods are, just modifications for, what people wanted in them, just done by everyday people, typically not by the developers themselves, usually by communities. And there's different types of mods, at least in the video game sense. And I'll kind of briefly go over the terminology that might come up. The big ones a lot of people see are called total conversion mods. And those are typically you take the entire game and kind of revamp or kind of it's kind of like, not like a remaster, but you basically reskin it. And you'll see this a lot.
Reimagine, I would say. A good example of that one is the XCOM Total War series.
Yeah. And there's like the Mountain Blade game, like Mountain Blade Warband has a lot of total conversion mods. Where like all of a sudden everything is Star Wars or everything is Lord of the Rings or everything is, a different time period. You basically take the core game and you can change it up all the assets, change out dialogue, stuff like that. The actual core stuff's still the same, but now it, plays like an entirely different game. And it just gives it more life. It's like, oh, I love this kind of system, but now you can, play it through these different styles. It's fantastic. But like, as we say a lot in the panel, like game mods are extensions of existing games, and a lot of games are also like, even what we call new games are also kind of just extensions of existing games, and around that kind of like magic 10% mark. And what game modding allows you to do is kind of play around and find, what that 10% is you want to change. And what this has led to over the years is just entire games popping off of another game, or even entire genres. Like the MOBA genre was spawned out of, I believe, StarCraft. And a few
Beyond Strife, baby. And
then things like Battle Royale started off as mods. There's a lot of stuff now where it's like, you have a system, and previously, if you wanted to make a game, the barrier of entry was incredibly high. And a lot of people, had the ability to tweak things through game mods. Everything was already done for you. You just got to change the game design. So the most common mods are typically the game design changes. We're tweak these settings. We're going to add new game modes. We're going to kind of change what the game is, but under the hood, the actual mechanics typically stay the same. And then there's
something sort of similar to that, in that there's like itemization mods. One of the games that made this really popular is Skyrim, where you'll just change some values on items. You'll maybe put a different texture on it, but functionally it's the same item, just with different properties.
Yeah, and like a lot of like the in-game asset, a lot of even just like property manipulation has started from a lot of modding in general, and people can save those, export them, give them to other people, or brand them or name them.
I don't approve of these ones as much, but there's also cheating mods.
Yeah. Performance mods are another one that they don't change the game itself too much, but these are kind of common for PC. I think we're probably only typically on PC games, where developers will rush a PC port and then kind of abandon it, and then people in the community just kind of take over and decide to fix it. And they'll
also like Skyrim.
Exactly. And the infamous DS fix. Did he?
Oh yeah, the amount of work that went into figuring out DS Fix and getting it to work as well as it does, and then the subsequent tools for Dark Souls 2, incredible.
Yeah. So kind of just a brief of just what they are, and just modifications. They've kind of been around for as long as gaming itself. So like the kind of history of the game mods dates back basically until like the first even just board games were created. Like most board games we play nowadays are just modded versions of ones that can even date back centuries. Like even modern chess had many different versions throughout history, and even just like modern things based off, Monopoly and stuff like that. But for video games, since video games have been around, there have been mods from them. And even, I think a lot of people don't know about this, but arcade cabinets, when those started to hit the scene, a lot of people took those and started modding them. Mrs. Pac-Man is a good example of that. She's actually a modded version of Pac-Man, which was done, I think, by a bunch of MIT students. Because they were, oh, we love this, but we kind of want some improvements. And it's just that kind of freedom of creativity you have, where you can take things, people love playing games, and eventually like, oh, we kind of want these changes, and they do that, and then other people can agree with those changes, like, oh, this is great. It kind of expands that. With that, and then as long as game modding has been around, there's also been this kind of unfortunate legal complexity with it, and that's always kind of just been there this whole run. It hasn't changed too much since the beginning. It's still kind of around now, where it's still not really fully yours to kind of change and then sell, and sometimes the original owners or the owners of the IP don't want you to make changes at all, and that's kind of a problem some people face. And same thing with the arcade cabinets. The first thing they found out when they're hearing, oh, they're modifying our cabinets, is they sent a bunch of lawyers, cease and desists. And the nice thing about that, those that ended up happening, is they just ended up hiring those people.
Yep.
And you'll find that along with the history of game mods, is it's been a very great way for people to get started in game development and actually kind of build portfolios, because it allows you to just flex whatever your skills are. You can just focus on that on an existing game and make those improvements or make those changes, and then you have something to show in your portfolio.
A quick touch on talking about the modding of the game cabinets. That was really interesting days of modding, because it wasn't as simple as changing some code. Everything was on physical chips at the time. So they were literally creating custom boards and soldering custom boards in, and having to access different memories and route things around on the boards to make these modifications. And that's why it was some MIT students doing it. Those brainy bastards.
Yeah, there was actual engineering that needed to go into it.
Yeah, to reverse engineer the whole thing and then re-engineer your improvements into it. And it's crazy. Thankfully, nowadays modding is a lot easier, and a lot of developers they encourage you to do mods. We'll talk about that.
Bethesda doesn't really sell games, they just sell a mod engine. It's really why people buy their games. Nobody buys it to play the game. Everybody buys it to play the mods.
It is true, and you'll see that with most of their games. And then it's quite common now, because it just adds like almost infinite replayability. It takes a game that would probably be dead within 1 to 2 years, and now people still talk about it over like close to 10 years later. Yeah, we'll talk about that a bit later, and about like modding tools that people have provided. But the history, so it starts off kind of, the arcade cabinets, hardware hacking and stuff like that, which is really crazy. And you basically needed to be an actual engineer to be able to figure that stuff out, like to have the access to hardware. But as kind of gaming developed and started coming into the homes, and especially PC gaming, a next giant milestone was id Software with Doom. And what they did was, when they made Doom and they released the Doom engine source code, they also provided level editors and software tools that allowed modifications to the game to be created a lot easier. And then we just saw an explosion of modded content. There's so many Doom mods out there, and they're still being created today, not just from custom maps, but entirely. That's when you started kind of seeing a lot of the kind of total conversion mods. There's a Batman version. If you can think of it, there's probably a Doom mod of it kind of thing, is just how many there are. And the smart thing it did is they've been ahead of the times for like most of the kind of game development lifespan, as they knew that this is going to be big. People want to make changes and have kind of that control, and it's going to build so much more a larger audience to what's going on. Is they packaged the source code and the ability to mod it, but you had to buy the full version of the game. So it kind of associated with it. You can make your own changes and make these things, but to be able to play the mods and make the mods, you have to have like the full version. And it led to an explosion of sales. And it's a model that a lot of companies follow suit. As we said, Bethesda has been fairly good about having their engines and games be heavily moddable.
Well, in the past. They're doing their best to kill it now.
Yeah, now that it's online, but
that's a whole other episode.
Yeah.
But I mean, on the id Tech note, you mean you're telling me that id Tech was an innovator even back then?
What?
I'm shocked and amazed.
We should do a panel on specifically how copy protection has worked over the generations.
Sure.
That'd be a good one.
It's complicated, but it's a very good topic. It is. Yeah, it's unfortunate for a lot of people too. It's still nowadays. There's a lot of fantastic modding communities and projects that, once they get to the point where they're too big, they get shut down.
Or bought up.
Hopefully we can get to a point where, there's maybe a market for it, because unfortunately as it is right now, there's been a few times through the history, and I guess I'll get there in a second, with the Steam and the workshop. So after the Doom engine, that kind of expanded. Unreal was the same thing as well. They started opening up their tools.
Yep, I remember them.
Engines, and it's just kind of how it was. A lot of games were released. They just allowed those tools. Custom map makers were just the thing you did, because that just added so much replayability. If you made a shooter, with only let's say 5 or 10 levels, that's going to get old. But if you have custom map support, all of a sudden there's unlimited content, new stuff that people can do, especially if you start allowing game modes and stuff like that. So things kind of continued. I think the next major notable milestone as well, which is kind of around the same era a bit later, is the StarCraft and Warcraft games. StarCraft, especially with their map editor, because it wasn't just changing the map, it also allowed you to change behaviors. And that's when we started seeing a lot of game mode changes, not just different ways, like not just the ways the map is, but the actual different ways to play the game. And these were things that worked multiplayer if you could share them. I didn't play too much of the StarCraft maps too much, because it kind of dates me a bit. For me, it was Warcraft 3, and there was just so many. I played, where this is kind of where these StarCraft and Warcraft 3 was where MOBAs were born. There was, Defense of the Ancients, Aeons of Strife, a lot of game modes that were like this. It was just that, tower defense. There was even just a lot of tower defense maps. There's all these kind of games being made within these other games, and these were starting to see, the spawning of new genres. People are like, I really like this game in this game, which is wild. And like, well, why don't we just take that game out of this and create a standalone version of it, which is what happened with League of Legends, and then of course with Dota 2. And it's like, well, we put the resources behind it, it just explodes. But it's that kind of incubator that mods provide, where it's you remove that barrier of entry, where if we wanted to make a game, or you had a game idea right now or back then, you would kind of have to make the game engine, you'd have to make all the assets, you would have to have this hardware to do it, and that is very complicated. It takes a lot of time and a lot of knowledge. But if that's already done for you, and you can just tweak a bit of properties or values to make the idea you have, it's possible. And we just see all these ideas, and the community is incredibly creative, and there's so many people that have so many great ideas and collaborate together, and just sees this explosion from then on. And then after that, I think the next major notable one was the Source engine.
StarCraft maps, before we get too far past it, I mean, they deserve some special attention, because that was the start of it.
Oh, yeah.
That was like, the first time I looked at a StarCraft map editor, my mind exploded. I could not fathom that you could do this much in an editor that came with the video game. Like, this is a program by itself.
It came with it.
You would pay that much just to be able to make these maps. Once you got going, you're like, oh my god, I think it was damn near a school course to learn how to use that damn thing. You had to learn. You had to understand a ton with the AI scripting and stuff like that you were now able to do. Trigger events. They introduced the concept of zones, trigger zones, reading units. Like, it was. If you've never ever looked at a StarCraft map editor and like a custom game thing, I strongly recommend picking it up and playing with it, because it may even get the juices flowing on something you want to do with it, because there is just so much you can do. And StarCraft 2 is still popular and played. You can absolutely grab that map editor and make a map and go play it. Like right now.
A really cool thing about it too is that a lot of those tools that we're actually using are the tools that devs themselves make. When you make games like this, it's very common that there's an entire team that's just tools programming. They make tools for the developers to use, because making maps without a map editor would be a nightmare, not even just for modders, but for the actual developers themselves. So it's actually very common that these tools already all existed. It just wasn't common for them to be included with the game itself. They were always just internal privatized tools that were used, and then this really started opening up. It's just ship these editors. It's not like there's too much behind it that's going to affect the actual game itself or sales or anything like that. It's not anything like it just allows for this creativity to form, and it was fantastic that they started doing that. And it's just, they're such powerful tools because they created them to make the game themselves, and it just makes so much sense to just include them to allow the community to extend the game itself.
There was another half step of safety they needed to take before they just gave the tools over to people a little bit more so than they would do when they were working with them themselves. But yeah, it's a fairly faithful port of here's how we make levels. Why don't you play with it too?
Yeah, it's for how it is now. I think like a lot of these tools nowadays are programmed with the expectation that we'll probably be putting them out there. So from the ground up, they're kind of at least built within a plan. But back then, there's a lot of things that could go wrong, and there wasn't always a lot of documentation.
Yes,
but it's when they started putting that
there was very, very little.
What even is documentation? I don't know. I've never seen it before.
And documentation, that was huge, and it just explodes. And they're easy to use, which is the main thing. It didn't require like a computer science degree, or doesn't require anything like that. You could just, it's fairly intuitive. Maybe not the most intuitive at first. They've gotten better over the years, but if you're dedicated enough, you could figure out how to make changes and make these custom maps. And for people who haven't made mods before, I highly recommend it because it's incredibly rewarding. It's so satisfying just to be able to make something. It's a creative pursuit, and if you love playing video games, you probably have lots of ideas you want to try.
Yeah, you can go ahead and test them and find out why they don't work.
Yeah, that's a really good, amazing for prototyping. So yeah, there's probably some things I'm missing in the 90s to 2000s or late 90s to early 2000s, but I
mean, every game basically in that span had their own little version of it. StarCraft became so popular with its map editor that basically all the RTS StarCraft clones had some sort of map editor to a varying degree of usability, but it became the benchmark for a long time. It was like, hey, a new RTS came out. Does it have a map editor? First question asked.
In a lot of ways, Brood War still is the benchmark for any strategy game.
Yeah, Blizzard North. We should do an episode just on them.
Yeah, and why we're always specifically talking about Blizzard North and not Activision Blizzard or the other Blizzard studios. And, spoiler, it's because all the good shit came from Blizzard North.
Yeah, noted. We'll have an episode on that coming up for sure.
Okay, so yeah, after custom maps is when, so it's kind of the early 90s until later 90s was when the original Source Engine and Half-Life released, and this kind of ushered in a new era of game modding. And with the Source Engine mods, they were a bit more complicated, and they kind of did require people to have that knowledge. They had map editors, which were great, and there was a lot of like the really nice 3D map editor. But this is when we started seeing, larger scale standalone mods that you'll still see to this day. This is where Counter-Strike came from, Day Defeat, Killing Floor, Team Fortress. Those all started as Source Engine mods. And they got so big and so popular, most of the time Valve would end up kind of just buying it, purchasing them, buying the devs, pulling them in, and then making a fully budgeted game. And they've survived for almost like over 20 years now. People still play a lot of those games, and it's just from the ability to mod an existing Source Engine.
And let's not forget Left 4 Dead.
Oh yeah,
also another very popular Source Engine mod.
Which is crazy to think about it because it's become such a massive game.
Yeah,
but lots of mods became so massive. So.
It's especially because a big thing about it too with mods, since there's the legal complexity around it, is that they're free. I should probably stress this a lot too. A lot of, or most mods are free, especially back in this era. So they were kind of just free games you can play as long as you had Half-Life, which most people did.
Yeah,
and
almost everybody.
Yeah, and then what Valve saw back then too is Half-Life was a single player kind of adventure game, and then with I think they. From the multiplayer support they did have, it didn't really stand out a whole lot compared to, how big Counter-Strike blew up. But everyone was buying Half-Life so they could play Counter-Strike. And just this free mod generates so much income, which is just amazing. That still shows up today. DayZ is a good example. DayZ was originally an Arma 2 mod. And there's a lot of people who are not interested in Arma 2 or would play Arma 2 at all. And they bought that game so they can play DayZ. I'd say probably a good sizable chunk of that, a lot of the people who bought Arma 2 was to be able to play DayZ.
Well, let's not forget either that the very first competitive tournaments for shooters was Counter-Strike.
Was it?
Yeah.
Was it? No, I think it was
Quake?
UT, wasn't it?
Were they doing it already professionally in UT era? I know it was getting big and popular, but the first time I remember like whole buildings being rented out and big cash prizes being done was Counter-Strike.
Yeah, Counter-Strike was definitely when it first, I think, started being like, when we started seeing things like DreamHack and started really, really getting those team esports built up.
Where does Fatality come from?
He was the most winningest Quake and Unreal player, and also Doom. The first one was Doom Deathmatch, apparently.
Yeah, but I would doubt it was very big. I mean, like when they first started becoming big, it was all Counter-Strike. That was the big popular one.
I think what we meant was like the arena scene when the actual.
Yeah, it started out as underground. You wouldn't call them pro esports players in those days. It was people who, played a lot of shooters in their spare time, getting together to compete. In those days,
first paid one on Liquipedia was by the CPL for Quake in 1997 with a $1,000 prize pool.
Yeah, I'd still call that the amateur just get together once in a while and pay.
PGL Season 1, which was, again, on Quake with a $15,000 prize pool in 1998.
Quake definitely founded it. I'll agree. You're not going to make a living off 15 grand.
No, but that wasn't really a thing until like, oh God, I want to say like the big StarCraft tournaments in the early 2000s.
Yeah, that blew it up to national TV levels. But I remember even when I was in high school, like buddies going to stadiums and stuff to play Counter-Strike, coming out with more money than they had any right coming out with. You're in high school, you bastard.
It's actually crazy to think of. I'm thinking about it more, like what Valve would be like without all those mods that they allowed for. Because I don't think they would be anywhere near the company they are today.
Yeah, Steam wouldn't exist, not like it does.
No, they wouldn't have been able to, because that was a major selling. Like, I think people forget that like Steam was hot garbage for a long time.
Yeah, well, and in that time, PC gaming almost died out. It was all console. Finding a game for PC was few and far between, slim pickings.
And it's and like DRMs in general just were, I mean, they still aren't great, but like that, like Steam was one of the first ones that, like, at least for me, what I remember, because all the games I had before Steam were just, you just had a CD and maybe a CD key in the manual that you entered when you installed it, and that's what it was. And that's when they first started kind of rolling out that, and the service they provided definitely wasn't great. People were, unwary about like not actually owning the game too much anymore, and it's hard for me to imagine them actually being able to gain the popularity if it wasn't for all their modded titles from the original game, or even just the company's success. It was like Half-Life is a great game, and Half-Life 2 is a great game, but I think without the community that gets built behind these multiplayer mods, I don't think they would be this giant, industry leader that they are today.
And I think that's just a more props to Steam and Valve for what they did, because they didn't just squash the creativity of their fans. They embraced the creativity of their fans and said, hey, let us give you a platform for these awesome things you're doing, and pulled them into the company and found ways to build on and then thus profit on these amazing ideas that were out there and not being capitalized on at the time. They were just left to rot.
Yeah, for sure. And it shows that it pays off, and like hopefully we see more and more of this in the future. So like that's after, I think it was one of the last major milestones and eras was the what the Source Engine kind of became, and then with the later version of the Source Engine with Steam, you saw the Community Workshop, and I think the Community Workshop, and around the same time, websites like Nexus Mods and ModsDB became staples in the community of where you get your mods and how you install them. But for a long time, installing mods was a bit of a technical challenge. It wasn't impossible for someone to learn with a guy without much computer knowledge, but you were changing files that if you did it wrong, your game wouldn't run anymore, and there wasn't any mod switching. You would have to copy files back and forth, and there was a lot of room for error. So the barrier to entry to actually installing mods was still there. So a lot of the times, only people you saw playing mods were people who were kind of really into computers or into that space. It wasn't until we started seeing the mod managers that Nexus released, and then things like the workshop. The workshop's a really big thing. I'm not sure, like what Steam has done with Community Workshop and the support they provide, not just their devs but the community, has been great. There's been a bit of hiccups with it, what we can talk about, which is always unfortunately going to be with Bethesda, which was the paid mods, which
that was a bad idea.
I'm on the fence about it, because I think paid mods need to be a thing at some regard, but they just did it so terribly wrong. I don't know how many people remember that, but it was basically
I'm not saying the idea of paying for a mod is terrible, but the idea of them profiting off of other people's mods is toxic as hell.
Yeah, the way they did it was terrible, and they barred out the actual mods that people would want, and the ones they basically did were like, we want the community to make us DLC, and then we're going to sell it and give them pennies for what was there. And then that, due to backlash, that quickly died, and you saw things like a dagger reskin in Skyrim that was $5, and it was just ludicrous. But the unfortunate thing is that the person who created that dagger actually does put quite a bit of effort into it. And modding is a labor of love. Well, most people are making mods not to get monetary values. They can't be making it for portfolios and stuff, but it's always been a labor of love. And
let's be totally clear, modding a game is no different than modding a car. You're doing it because you love doing it, and you have a vision and a dream that you want to make, and you're never going to get the money out of it for the time you put into it. Not going to happen.
But there was potential, and it's unfortunate the potential got squandered, because it's things like games like DayZ or those total conversion mods that had the potential then to incubate, and then all of a sudden the people who are working on it don't have to just work on it nights and weekends anymore. They might be able to do it. It still happens quite a bit nowadays, but it's usually through donations, and which is fantastic, and it's great that the community will donate so much that people can actually work on some of these mods full time. But there's still a lot of uncertainty about it, since because there is no precedent for it and no system in place. The owners of those IPs at any time can shut those things down.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing that would have been nice. The $5 daggers, I'm like, no, that's silly. But like a like a $5 or $10 total conversion mod where now you're playing Morrowind in the Skyrim engine, which does exist.
Yep.
That's cool, and I know a lot of people who would actually kind of pay for that and stuff like that. And it gets complicated with expectations when people pay for mods, and they're never really as stable as they are. But I think that if that was the kind of direction we went to, it could grow into something that became a bit standard, where someone could just come up with larger ideas and not have to worry too much about the legal complexities, be able to make games within games, and they make money, the original developers make money, everyone could have been happy.
I agree with you that as soon as you start Hello, thank you very much for the sub. Welcome to the table. Nice having you with us. But on your point, I agree that once the money starts changing hands, it changes all the implication. And all of a sudden, there's a certain expectation of quality and deliverance, and that can maybe be not a good thing in the mods.
Yeah. I think the system there is now has been working okay. For the most part, which is what you typically see is free mods of games, and then when they grow in popularity, it's usually by donations, and then when it gets to a point where it's large enough, the parent company of the game will typically buy the developers or hire them on full time to work on the project full time in a standalone. And we've seen that with many Valve games, and the latest DayZ standalone, and PUBG as well. I can't remember if PUBG was actually associated with Bohemian, or if they went out on their own, but that's kind of where we're at right now, which has kind of been working, but it's just there's still just that precedence. If the only part that's really kind of unfortunate about that is the legal precedent is unknown, and you never know when all of a sudden the company can pull out and then your project is completely dead. Yeah,
as soon as you start making money, you're much more legally obliged to follow laws.
So yeah, the community workshop though is absolutely fantastic, and I think that's kind of where we are now. The current state of game mods is the community workshop. You'll see a lot of games on Steam you'll play, and you'll see that workshop tab, and there's all the mods there, and all you have to do to put them in your game is click that little subscribe button, and they're in. And that has just streamlined the process so much. And now that it's so easy, it's a huge audience for people to consume it, and now the audience for people to create it is also a lot easier because they have tools provided by the community workshop to integrate with these games. So you don't have to worry about. Typically, how it was done is you take data editor tools and copy the data of a game and start editing all the data of the game, and then once you kind of had it how you liked it, you package that up as a new version, and then to use it, the player would have to either overwrite some of the files in their game or have it pathed differently and load up that version. Well, now with these mod managers, it's a lot easier to do that. Even just to create them, you can just go through all your different versions. And now we've seen, like most Valve games, I think have them. You have Left 4 Dead with so many mods. I think Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2 is probably one of my favorite games to mod or to use mods on, just because of how silly it is. Like you can be raptors holding lightsabers, shooting stormtrooper zombies with like a Old Spice tank throwing giant deodorant at you. It's just wild what can happen. It's not like, it's just the silly aspect of it is just hilarious with friends, but even some of the more serious mods, like there's graphic update, gore update, performance update, texture updates, all this stuff. It's just fantastic, and now they're just at a click of a button. So it's absolutely just fantastic that the service is provided.
Just to add on to that before you get too far past workshops, my favorite part of it isn't actually the install, but the automatic update of mods and version checking when you launch the game.
And compatibility. Yeah. Compatibility is huge.
Yeah.
Like before, like anyone who's modded Oblivion or Skyrim before this will know that you're like, all right, I'm going to try this mod, but see what happens. And and you crash. And it's like, I just wanted a nicer looking horse armor.
And of course you're playing Oblivion or Skyrim, so you're like, is the game crashing or the mod crashing? And that's an eternal question.
It's kind of gotten to the point now where modding is just, or community mods are just a kind of major part of the actual games. And like modern consumers are just aware of it. They can use it. It's there now. It's at the point now where anyone who wants to use mods can use it. It's been a long road to that. The source mods before, there was a lot of custom plugins that were written. People who played, Gary's mod and source games will know that you'll go to join a map and it says, well, you need these plugins. Well, then eventually you join a map and it's like, okay, well, we're going to download the plugins for you. So just click OK and wait a while, and we'll download the custom map. We'll download everything and it'll install. Because thankfully the source engine was pretty good at managing custom content for that stuff. But it was really when that workshop came out, because now we have reviews, we have searching, we've got filtering. It's an actual marketplace, and it's fantastic, and it's just expanded so much. And that's kind of where we are today. What's happening kind of now is we're seeing a bit more of the larger mods die down. It's still kind of a lot of the kind of silly tweaks or graphical updates, performance things. There are quite a few larger total conversion mods being worked on, but with how the Unity engine and Unreal Engine are, the barrier to entry to actual game development has been reduced so much that there isn't really that requirement to mod a game to make your idea. If you have like a full idea, a lot of people will just be able to make their game fully in that.
If you have a few hours to watch some videos, you can download Unreal Engine and make a game without writing code. It's not going to be an efficient game, a releasable game, but you can make your POC and test everything and get it all working without ever actually writing code. Kind of amazing.
Because modding games was what most people did to prototype. Prototyping is a very important step in game development and just software in general. You need to make sure that your ideas are going to work. Humans are very creative, but we're not very good at big picture final implementation stuff. So everyone will kind of go through this too, especially as amateur game designs. Every idea you have, you're going to feel like is great because it's your idea and this is what you want. But then you implement it, and most of the time you'll find that they're better on paper, and you actually implement it and you're like, okay, this isn't so good. The nice thing about mods is you could do that fairly quickly. You can test that stuff out without having to plan a whole game, build a whole engine, do all this stuff, and then find out that your idea wasn't great, and well, now what kind of thing.
Now at least you have an engine to work with.
Yeah. Now we have engines and blueprints and stuff for prototypes. So we've seen that, but we still see a lot of smaller mods and graphical things updated. GTA 5 is a hilarious source of mods, and we're starting to see a rise in huge total conversion mods from these communities where everyone's going on Discords. And I think Fallout New Vegas is being remade in Fallout 4, which is super cool.
That's cool. Yeah, I really like this interesting trend of remaking old games in new engines with level editors. I saw another guy play through GoldenEye, where the levels were remade in, I think it was Far Cry 5, might have been Far Cry 4. It was one of the two. But the level, they looked brilliant with all the flashy new graphics. And I guess you can even script the AI for the enemies in that one. So they changed their behavior. So they even behaved a lot like they used to in the old GoldenEye. And it was pretty amazing.
One of my favorites is the Super Mario 64 remake that was being done in Unreal Engine.
Rip.
That one's super cool.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate
it died.
Unfortunate example of the plug getting pulled.
Yeah, the heavy fist of Nintendo.
Yeah.
You don't anymore. That's the problem.
Yeah, Nintendo killed it, unfortunately.
It got deaded. It's Super Mario Rip now.
Yep. Then they released their own remake of 64 and took out all the things people liked about it, and everyone went, "Why would we buy this?" But that's another entire message or episode entirely again.
Trying to think of other notable mods that have been struck dead. Nintendo's usually the one to do it. But I remember there was something else recently that got shut down. That was a big mod. Let's see if I can remember. Private servers were another big one that got shut down. They're not so much on I actually guess they are. A lot of them were actually modded with a lot of custom content. A lot of MMO games will have custom servers you can join that are just basically custom versions of the game. I think World of Warcraft was a really big one for a long time. And
yep.
I think
custom
one of the notable
servers.
Ones was there was a custom server or private server that was just the original version of WoW. So like WoW basically, and then Blizzard shut it down, and then a year or two later they release WoW Classic, which they own it and they're allowed to do it, and it's just an unfortunate side of things. I haven't looked into it too much. I hope that they hired some of the people associated with that project, but chances are they didn't.
I don't think they did. So
it's just kind of unfortunate. They could have existed side by side maybe, but at the end of the day they're trying to make money, and it's an unfortunate. I think it's one of the unfortunate sides of it is the legal complexities, and you put all the hours into a project, and there's no guarantee that you're just going to get it shut down and or sued depending on how far along it got. It's kind of a risk.
Yeah, well, it's a bigger risk when you're doing a direct remake of a game like that. Like they have a lot more reasonable grounds to come after you and do something at that point than if you were like making Dota in Warcraft 3.
Yeah,
that's nothing alike each other anymore.
Yeah, it's where the issue usually comes in was when like donations are getting to the point where like they need to have some income to run servers and all that. Kind of just the subscription based model. It's still competing where a lot of games, when you mod them, the players have already bought the game, and it encourages more players to buy the game. But I think, yeah, it's very complex and it's very unfortunate. We can transition into talking about a lot of games that you probably didn't know started as mods as well. Just kind of go over some notable mods and some of our favorites if people have forgotten or not.
Yeah, I'm not going to say might not know. Let's just list bold games that started as mods. I don't think we can go anywhere without first starting with the biggest one. Pretty sure everyone knows League of Legends started as a mod, but yeah, League of Legends totally started as a mod. I'm going to just put a / Dota.
Yeah.
Because it started as Dota.
Just that whole genre, which is crazy. And there's a few of these on that list that are just entire genres that started as mods.
Yeah, that's worth noting. The entire genre of MOBA is what that was spawned by. And which was actually from, what was the StarCraft one?
Aeon of Strife.
And the what were they? The custom, the laneway map, the 3-lane where you build units and it just spawns units and sends them down the laneway, and you just respond to their unit type.
The tug of war games.
Yeah, tug of wars.
Can't remember. There's modern.
I guess that hasn't turned into an actual game yet, though, has it?
There are a few
out
there like that. They're kind of like
there's a couple.
Events. I can't remember.
They were fun.
Names, there's quite a few. Battle Royale games is probably one of the more popular ones right now. A lot of people don't know that it actually started through. I'm trying to think if it actually started in Arma. I believe it started originally as an Arma 2, Arma 3 mod. That was the Battle Royale game mode, which was made by PlayerUnknown, who's gone on to make PUBG. And then from that, even Fortnite, the actual game of Fortnite, the Battle Royale was just a kind of in-house mod of their current game to add that game mode to it. So Fortnite, as people know it, originally was not what it is today. It's actually just game mode they added to it that just ended up to blow up huge.
They just had an engine and they applied the most popular style to it, and it caught on.
Yeah. Team Fortress 2, Day of Defeat, Killing Floor. Those are also noticeable. One, like Killing Floor 2. Most people don't know too much of the history of it, and it started off as a source mod. DayZ and all those kind of survival horror games. Rust is a funny example of this, because Rust is actually originally was a clone of DayZ. So it was a mod of a mod, which then became a standalone. And I remember when I first played Rust, it had zombies in it, and then it was one of those first games that kind of realized, like, no one likes these. These are annoying as hell. It turns out we just like shooting at people, and we just take out all that kind of bullshit in between, and then these games just blew up, and it's like, oh yeah, that's what we wanted. And I don't know if anyone's played DayZ, but the AI for zombies in that game is like horribly broken, and it was never an enjoyable mechanic. It was just always a pain, and it wasn't scary, it wasn't fun. It was just, I'm surprised it took so long for someone to be like, what if we just removed the shitty parts? And that's a mod of a mod. Modify the game, make it better, and now we have PUBG, Rust, and whatever Fortnite Battle Royale is.
So Talos, what are your favorite game mods? Or we're up to the point of games that started their life as a mod. The show's going pretty well. Always an interesting talk, and when we're talking about game mods, it's always fun. Always fun. We started with a quick recap. What are game mods? A quick history of them. And now we're talking about games that a lot of people don't realize started their entire life as just a mod. It's just a mod in a game that people liked playing that became a full game. And I'm sure you know of at least one. At least one you can add to the list. Red Orchestra is a mod.
Red Orchestra was quite popular as well.
Yeah, and that became a standalone.
H1Z1 originally was a zombie survival thing. Yeah. Was that a mod as well?
It was based off DayZ, so it was kind of that mod of a mod, and then it was a standalone version. But then they also branched out and put Battle Royale into it as well, and that started to kind of grow in popularity.
Yeah, Battle Royale was literally everywhere after it became a thing.
It's one of those genre-defining things. Other, and then there's just some. I'm trying to think. I think I had some. The Stanley Parable was a mod that people don't realize before it became a standalone game. And things like Cry of Fear, people kind of know it's a mod, but it's just, there's a lot of horror games that started off as just Half-Life mods that now have a standalone version.
That's an interesting. I can see it though. As we've seen, first person actually works really, really well for horror. Go figure. Still want Doom Battle Royale, we talked about last week, and I hate Battle Royales. Anything Doom is just good, right?
There's some good shit in that idea. We would just need to figure out how to mod id Tech 7 and then actually do it. and I'm not doing either of those things.
It would be a lot of fun, but it would also be a lot of work, so it's not going to happen. Yeah, that's where I'm at with it too.
I'm still wondering if Halo is actually going to put Battle Royale in Halo Infinite.
Oh, they are, and it's going to be terrible.
Oh. Where's Gary's mod on that list? That's a good
Gary's
call.
mod on. I think a lot of people actually don't remember that, even though it's in the name. Gary's Mod 9, I believe, was the last version before it became standalone. Its own
Gmod
standalone title.
standalone? What?
Yeah.
TIL.
Yeah, Gary's Mod is a standalone. For the longest time, it was Gary's Mod 9. You needed the source. You needed at least one source game. I think you needed like either Half-Life or Counter-Strike to be able to play it.
I remember that.
It required those asset packs. But Gary's Mod 10 became its own standalone thing. I think those requirements got dropped. But Gary's Mod 9 was wonderful. And then Gary's Mod 10 is just absolutely wonderful. That's just one of those mods that just has so much extra modding potential in it. And we see so many game modes that come out of that. Such as like Trouble in Terrorist Town. I don't know how I almost forgot about this. Mods of the actual mods. So we can maybe talk about the notable mods of mods, because this is going to get kind of crazy. Anyone who played a lot of Counter-Strike will know this. All the zombie survival mods were fantastic. I can't remember what the game modes are actually called, so if someone in chat remembers. Ones where, there's one zombie starts, and they basically only have a knife, but they move faster and they have a whole lot of health, and they basically stab people, and then they turn into zombies, and it's basically, either survivor amount of time or last man standing. Jailbreak is fantastic. Surf is fantastic. For people who don't know what Jailbreak is, they're broken up into two teams: people who are in jail and people who are kind of the cops, and they have rules basically. And if you don't follow the rules, they will just kind of kill you. And what the inmates have to do is, somehow either find a weapon, or some jail cells will have a weapon in them, and they kind of have to conceal it or hide it, and eventually try to like overtake the guards. Gary's mod had really interesting roleplay mods, where you would basically just have an entire town, and people would take jobs. There would be cops, there would be a mayor who was elected, there's gun sellers, there's just ordinary citizens, and people make money. And then there's a whole, with cops, there's the robbers, there's people who are, committing crimes, they're printing money, they're growing drugs. There's a whole crazy atmosphere, and they grew into these huge communities. And I think some of them are still running today. So like RP mods were insane. I think Grand Theft Auto is probably some of the bigger RP mods now, with entire communities that you have to like apply for. Prop Hunt is another one of my favorites. I'm not sure if anyone's played.
Oh yeah, Prop Hunt is great.
And
Yeah, I've seen that.
You get to just choose a prop, and then you have to hide anywhere on the map. And then there are the kind of like it's like hide and seek. It's basically just hide and seek, but you're hiding as props. This is what I'm surprised. There probably have been standalone spinoffs, but they probably just haven't been able to be as big as the mod versions.
Mm-hmm.
But I know at least in the Gary's mod version, you can walk up to any object and clone it, basically, and become it. And I think in some of the Counter-Strike ones, you just kind of select it from like an in-game menu. But you choose to be a prop, and you try to hide somewhere that, is obvious, because the finders only have, so much ammo or so much resource. I think every time they shoot, they lose health or something like that if they don't actually... They can't just spray everywhere, so they have to be sure. And it's so much fun. It is. If you haven't played it, I highly recommend it. You're just hiding, and it's intense and stress. And then as soon as they stop and look at you, and they're going to start shooting, you just try to make a run for it, and try to like turn a corner and change your prop real quick and blend in somewhere. My favorite thing to do was always find a door or hide by somewhere where there's a door that was open, but kind of, not fully open. So there's a bit of like a bit of a crack behind it. So I'd run through there, quickly go behind the door and change into like a soda can, so I'm small. And then they wouldn't peek that corner. They just wouldn't, and they just keep running by, and I'm like, I'm safe. But yeah, Prop Hunt was fantastic. There's so many just game modes that get made from these mods. No More Room in Hell was another mod that became kind of a standalone game, and they actually they announced a sequel that's coming out, I believe, this year. It's it's very similar to how Left 4 Dead is. You have your safe rooms, and you're trying to go from safe room to safe room, but basically they redid the game design, where instead of it being like a run and gun, shoot everything, it's very slow and methodical. You need to plan and communicate with your team, and you get infected, and when you die, you turn into a zombie, and your character will start running around, which adds a whole other dynamic where, someone will get hit and they won't say anything because they don't want you to shoot them because they're hoping to find an antidote, or they just want to be an asshole because it's fun. And the next thing you know, you turn around, you're like, why are they on the ground? And then they just get up as a zombie, and you're like, oh shit. And usually when they do that, they're the fresh zombie, so they run fast. That game's a whole lot of fun.
I can admit it's pretty fun being an asshole. It is.
It's like you get hit and you're like, are you good? Are you infected? And you're like, nah, man, I'm good. I'm good. Or like you won't, like if you're not playing through like a external voice chat, like the game, you have in-game walkie-talkies you have to pick up. So if you're playing just with people online, you'll be like, hey, where are you? Hey, you're good. But if they're dead, you don't know because the game doesn't tell you when someone dies. And you'll turn the corner and you just see that dude just running at you, and you're like, oh.
That captures zombie well. That's the feeling you should get from zombies.
Yeah, it was really cool because it's like same idea as Left 4 Dead. 4-player. Actually, I think it might be more than 4-player now, but 4-player point to point with some kind of checkpoint things in between, and just a bit more serious, but it's definitely a completely different audience. Dying Light multiplayer was interesting. The whole invade system has been something that's kind of exploded out of the Souls series and is showing up everywhere now. And apparently, even Doom Eternal is putting in an invading mechanic.
Yeah, that one is still weird to me. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around people invading me while I'm playing Doom.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
I mean, the reason it's in Dark Souls is actually explained in Dark Souls lore. That's why it works there. It makes sense in the world.
Yeah, it's probably why they didn't put it in Sekiro. I don't think Sekiro doesn't have invading, right?
Nope.
Sekiro has no multiplayer.
It does kind of now.
It does have a multiplayer mod, which barely works, but is really cool.
It does have
no multiplayer.
It does have the messages that you can send to other players now.
Yeah,
that's cool. But it's nice that they didn't just include invading just because that's what everything has. Even they can recognize certain especially single player experiences still need to stay as a single player experience. Especially with how that kind of combat in that game is. I don't think would have translated too well to multiplayer. It would have been too hard to get that net code that tight for those,
Well, it doesn't even translate particularly well to playing not locked on. Playing not locked on kind of ruins the combat engine. Yeah.
So it's cool that they did that, or left that out. But we see invading everywhere. Other really cool game mods that are out there are the graphical overhauls, and you'll see these in shader packs for Minecraft or Skyrim improvements, or GTA 5 has some insane photorealism mods, which you kind of need a pretty beefy computer to do. But it's really cool that you can take some older games and throw a modern style on them too, and just overhaul the entire look and just make them beautiful. There's a cool mod for Battlefield 2 called Project Reality, which took it and didn't really make it look more realism, but added the similar to like normal room and how there's added a realism game design element to it. And you can all of a sudden you have minimum HUD. There's like a first aid system. You get shot, you're going to basically die. It tightens up with the controls for the experience that people want. And it's really cool to see those kind of game modes added within games, especially when they're already mods themselves. That's why I love like Counter-Strike game modes so much, because you're just like, how many layers deep can the mods go? Can we mod zombie survival mode even farther?
The answer is always yes. And I mean, talking about all these mods, we haven't even mentioned like all the sandbox games, because there's a massive wealth of mods in Factorio and RimWorld and all of them. Restored content mods are great. Finding all the unused content left in the files. Arc. I don't play Arc, but it's got 1,000,001 mods. Custom servers. Minecraft.
Yeah, Minecraft's a massive one. There's been so many game modes, or even just enhancements added to it. Like Feed the Beast is like, I believe, a collection of a whole lot of popular game mods bundled together into one nice kind of cohesive and supported package. and it's really crazy if people haven't played it, because it takes, like, Minecraft on its own it's fun and all, but things like you get mods that add portal guns, you get mods that add full physics and thermals and science. You're building these full reactors. You basically can almost mod in like factorial level kind of stuff into Minecraft, which is really cool.
Yeah, and then Factorio goes even farther because it started that way.
Yeah.
The shit I've seen people do in Factorio blows me away. Full on building a computer just in the game.
Yeah, New Vegas is a good one. It's unfortunately how unstable the game can be. But,
yes, it can be. Unfortunate is the correct word there.
a new major mod for it just released, I believe it's called the Frontier mod, which is like a West Coast mod for it, and it makes the game take place in Oregon, which is kind of cool. It's still awesome that people are still working on this and creating new mods.
Yeah, I wonder what the oldest game still being modded is.
Probably Doom.
Skyrim.
Are the people still making Doom mods?
Actually Doom. Yeah, there was a new Doom level that was released, like last year?
Well, we already went over that it was the first, so if it's still being used, it's the oldest.
Oh, yeah. It's one of those things where Doom will probably never die, because the can it run Doom will always be a thing.
Wolfenstein is older
than Doom, but yeah. Doom was modded first. Like, it had a supported mod structure that you can just add stuff to it.
Wolfenstein was a much simpler Doom engine. They hadn't gotten it fully fledged out, so Wolfenstein didn't have the multiplayer before Doom, and Wolfenstein didn't have the mod engine before Doom. Doom came out with those things.
I do remember there was like Smurfenstein version of Doom where you could shoot Smurfs. But Doom was the one where they released the source code and released dev tools, and it really just exploded, and they supported the creation of mods.
Thank you, Id. Thank you, Id, for keeping gaming good for so many years. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's actually like I haven't talked too much about, because they're very hard to do, but there are actually like quite a bit of console mods. I've run a custom version of Smash Bros for the Wii for a while, and there's a huge community for it, and it's just absolutely hilarious. I have Pikachu skinned over Ganon, which you can just try to imagine what that looks like, and it's hilarious. It got to the point where it was just wild to see what could be done and put in, and it's still a fighting game, but it's not Smash anymore, and it's just this whole other thing, and it's like custom music, custom sound effects. When you get knocked off the ledge, like when you die, it plays air horn sounds now, which is just amazing. And it's just when you get like spiked, it'll say like "got him," and like it's just like console monsters are rare because it's a lot harder to do, and requires quite a bit of tooling to do and such like that. But there's still a huge kind of community out there, and there's some wild stuff people come up with. One of my favorite ones is I've played at least, is a 4-player shared screen version of Ocarina of Time, which is just confusing as hell. It wasn't a very enjoyable experience, but it was just like hilarious to play with like 4 people. It's just like, I played this as a kid, and this is not something I would ever think I'd experience. Is what if I had 3 more links? And it's just
what if I was just doing this but 3 times and with way less coordination?
It's a mod into a system or an engine that definitely was never going to support anything like this. You don't have any of the luxuries that you typically have. Like, there is the link, like the first person, like there's like the first link, and that's what the camera is, and everyone else kind of just is hanging out, and you kind of have to stay on screen as best you can. The screen doesn't, zoom out or anything. So if the first player link turns around, everyone else is just like, where am I? So it turns into this weird thing of like the first player link is at the back and everyone else is in front of them. And it's definitely not like a full playable experience, but it's just hilarious what people come up to. And it's still great that, people mod things on consoles, and there's still modded versions of console games.
Did this all start with randomizer talk? Because randomizers are an amazing mod that have become super popular in the console world.
Yeah, big love for randos. But on an amazing note, there is now progress being made on PS4 mods, which means Rando Bloodborne and there have already been some difficulty mods for Bloodborne as well, cranking up the number of enemies, cranking up the aggression, changing their leash distances, stuff like that. Very, very cool.
Yeah, changing leash distances could cause a lot of issues. Excuse me. That'd be an interesting one.
It's I think it's called the Bloodborne aggression mod, done by the same person who did the Dark Souls 1 aggression mod, and you can't run through the game anymore. You can't do it. Everything's coming to kill you.
Because leashing is often done to keep units in their zones for unit tracking and memory management and stuff like that. So when it starts pathing through different node zones, you have to move memory around more and do more complex things. So that's more, that mod is more work than people think it is. To take away leashing and not crash your game that's some work. That's some work.
Well,
that's why.
Let's not say not crash the game, because it's not perfect, but it is definitely less crashing than I thought there would be.
Yeah, to be able to have the game playable through is just impressive. Period. With a mod like that, because that is there's real world reasons why mobs leash in games, and it's not just to make the game easier for you. It's the way that they're tracking mobs and knowing what's in the world in order to give commands to things and control things that are around you. I'm not going to get too technical, but there's a lot going on there.
The game I was talking about, Des, I'm not sure if you missed it or not, was a 4-player version of Ocarina of Time that I got to play.
Yeah.
Which was just wild. I almost forgot about, there's the Sven co-op mod for Half-Life. You can play Half-Life and Half-Life 2 in co-op mode, which is actually pretty fun. It's one of those things where it's a lot of single-player games probably don't translate well into multiplayer, but it's still cool that, this is something that's possible, and kind of insane that people can mod in. Most of the time, it's, at least for Sven, it's because they can basically remake Half-Life in the source engine, or just kind of implement the multiplayer mechanic into it. But some of these other ones I've seen out there where people have tried to make, multiplayer Oblivion, it's just kind of nuts.
Kind of nuts, and kind of doesn't work.
Not at all.
There is a Bloodborne randomizer. The release version of the PS4 firmware has been cracked, and there is a way to install mods. I watched Lobos play the Bloodborne's aggression mod, and I know that there is a rando on the way.
Yeah. I mean, it's been cracked for a while. They've been accessing files on it, and it's been a thing for a while. I know that. Speedrunners have been using it to create, like we were talking about in our speedrunning episode, copies of their save files at various states, so they can throw files back into the game's memory and say this save is at this point, and do testing and bosses and practice on areas with the right setup and stuff like that.
Wasn't there a MechWarrior game that started off as a mod that we wanted to talk about? I can't remember if we...
I don't know. I'm not a huge MechWarrior fan. The only one I really played was Heavy Gear. Did Heavy Gear start as a mod?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
It was a Crisis game that turned into a mod, some MechWarrior game, but it's...
Cool. Yeah. They used Crisis Engine and modded it to create a MechWarrior multiplayer game until MechWarrior started releasing an actual multiplayer game. Then they stopped until the game came out and was terrible, and then they went back to making their mod.
Oh, no.
It became quite popular too. Apparently it's quite good. Can get into mechs and pilot mechs around in Crisis. It started out as a Crisis mod, and I believe it just became a project on Crytek after a while.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. For something like that, the amount of scripting that you'd need to do is pretty extreme. So at that point, you might as well just make a video game.
Mech Crisis mod. It was called MechWarrior Living Legends. Yeah.
Neat.
I totally forgot that Insurgency actually started off as a Half-Life mod. Insurgency 2,
Oh, yeah.
One of my favorite
Yep.
shooters. Yeah, there's
I was scrolling through my Steam library to try and find other games that are also had also started out as mods, and I've realized that I play almost none of them, which is a shame because there are some really, really good ones out there.
Yeah, I'm not huge on games that get modded either. In general, the ones that I like are, like I said, the Rim Worlds, stuff like that. I love my sandbox games, and I mean those games survive on mods. Period. You can do 1 or 2 playthroughs, and then you're like, we're gonna need to get some mods up in here. I always do a couple runs vanilla though, because you have to get that run vanilla in so that afterwards you can go, what does this game need? You can't just add stuff to it before you played it.
Randomly throw stuff in.
Yeah. You need to understand what it needs. And honestly, there have been times where like, oh, I really wish I could do this, so I've added it to the game, and then I'm just like, it just killed the balance. It just broke the game. That's not good. Now I can just cheat things. Like I added the mine in to RimWorld, and all of a sudden I can just like get as much gold and jade as I want. And I was just like, okay, I'm way too rich now. I guess there's nothing to stop me in the game. Let's go back to the way it was.
Yeah, it's an interesting reflect. It allows people to reflect on game design decisions, because it's one of those things where you think would be great, and then all of a sudden oh, maybe these were left out for a reason, or these mechanics are the way they are for a reason. We can mosey on into how do you mod games, and how to get started, and how if people want to start getting into the modding communities, how they can do so. It's never been a better time to do it, especially with a lot of people at home all the time. A lot of people have been really dedicating a lot of their time into these games. There's huge Discord communities that you can join. There's huge projects that you can apply for if you want to join something a bit more complicated, if you have a game development skill set already. Yeah, just in general, like modding is just a fantastic way just to get into the game dev industry, or just to learn about game development in general. Just by modding games, you're going to learn about how games are structured, how they are, whether it's you're coding, or if you're making 3D models to replace. You're just going to see what the asset pipeline is. You get to learn all the terminology. You just get exposed to what it is, and it's a fantastic way to kind of dip your feet in, and kind of without any real cost to it. You don't have to pay for classes. There's all these online resources to do it. You kind of just get exposed and start learning. It's a fantastic little thing, and it's not overwhelming. Where if you want to get into game development, like, I want to make a game. Well, it's like, well, now you need to learn programming. You need to learn how to if this was a couple of years ago or a while ago, you need to learn how to make an engine properly, or use a graphics API, and it was overwhelming. But now it's just a lot easier to download these SDKs, and you'll find in Steam, for people who have Steam, if you go to the tools section, there's a lot of things with the name SDK on them, or tool set, or editor, and these are all tools that you can download for free and use to make content and modify content with your game. And a lot of them are integrated with the community workshop, so there'll be a publish feature with these. So when you make something, you can publish it, and it gets added, and there you go. You've made a mod.
Where do we think is the best place to start? Honestly, if we're gonna say, here's where you get started, let's start with what games are the best to just pick up and try to make a mod in. Which I really think the first question at that point, if you should have to ask yourself, is, what's your idea? What's your idea closest to? Right? If your idea is a first-person shooter, then maybe StarCraft isn't the best game to pick up and start with the modding engine of.
Yeah, probably not where you want to start. But there's a lot of tooling available for different stuff, like the fact that the Unreal Engine, you can get the in development beta version of Unreal and the Unreal Engine and just throw more stuff in there. Maybe it's a little more in depth than you would want to start with, because the Unreal Engine is actually fairly difficult to work with. But the fact that that platform is there is awesome. You can also do stuff like, if you're an artist, you can create textures, you can create models and replace them in other games. There are tons of tools for packing textures into different formats.
If you're an artist and you're looking for a way to get started, join our Discord and ask, because we always need artists.
Oh yeah, we always need the artists. We're a bunch of engineer nerds. We're not so good at art.
There is a community of people doing game dev and game mods and stuff within the Discord, and there's a lot more coders than there is artists. So if you're an artist and wanting to get in, jump in and ask questions, and people would love to teach you whatever you want to know just to get their hands on your skill set. Come on and join us. And if you're a programmer, join us anyway. More programmers always helps, and hey, it's more people to ask questions too, right? So when you get stuck, ask. I've never seen a question not get answered in our Discord. Just saying.
And pretty immediately too.
Yep, we have a really good community with some really smart people in there. And that is the best way to get into modding or game dev. Join a community and ask some questions and just start learning.
Yeah, we just got to start doing it. So what I would say for modding at least is kind of find out what specific areas you're going to want to kind of focus on, and what kind of interests you and what kind of skill set you have. So if you're an artist, you could be playing a game like, if you're a 3D artist, like, these models are okay, maybe I want to improve them. Like, it'd be kind of funny if I replaced these tanks with, giant hot dogs that shot, maybe smaller hot dogs. Anything, like if you want to get silly, you can, or any creation or changes you want to make to the models, you can join the communities. You can find out, how do I change models? You'll see, if there's a workshop, you'll see that other people have been changing models. And what you'll typically find is that asset replacement is fairly straightforward nowadays. You can actually import, a lot of games allow you to import their models into 3D editing software. So you can use, Maya, you can use Blender, you can use whatever, and you can make changes, and then you just re-import them into the game, and now you have your custom thing, which is, it's really cool. The first time you do it and you make your own change and you start playing a game that has your own flavor in it, it's an amazing feeling. It's just, at least from when I was growing up, I didn't feel like it was something that would ever be possible, that you could just, have a complaint about the game or have an idea about a game and be able to, implement it. But the time we're living in, it's just fantastic. Community is always the best part. Always look for documentation. Most of the time now, a lot of major engines or major publishers have tooling support and documentation. Unfortunately, sometimes the documentation isn't great, but at least it's there. The best thing of all is just community. Ask people for help. People are more than willing to help you, especially if you have a cool idea. But for games, there are certain games that are easier to mod than others, and certain games that modding them builds certain skill sets, which can be nice if you're trying to learn programming or trying to get into a computer science background. So if you're interested in learning Java, Minecraft is a fantastic resource to learn, because you can start making mods for Java, and it's at the point now where you're kind of more on the scripting side of things. You're making the resource packs, and for a lot of people who play Minecraft, it's already that sandbox game of, you're just supposed to do whatever you want, and you're just supposed to have that kind of creative outlet. And it's just, crazy things you can do, just tweaking things and modifying things, then building up on those skill sets you can start kind of overhauling and implementing new things. So, things like, make yourself run fast.
You want to list for easy games to start with?
Gary's mod, which is for Lua. If you want to learn Lua scripting, Gary's mod is fantastic for that. The Sims is really good for assets. If you want to start kind of changing out assets or making asset packs, or creating textures and skinning and stuff, Sims is pretty good for them. They've had pretty great mod support from the start. It was kind of one of the design principles they went with. If you're into kind of game design and campaigns and stuff like that, most games with a map editor are fantastic. Divinity Original Sin 2, I think, has one of the best right now for full kind of campaign separate from the story without having to do too much actual scripting. They've kind of just, we're on the line that people kind of want to make their D&D campaigns in there. Source game, it's starting to get kind of more of the complicated stuff, but another really good easy one is Roblox. It's not so much modding, but it's kind of just I guess it is modding. Making scripts and modifications in game modes for Roblox is another really great way to kind of get into game development, because all the harder stuff is done for you. You just get to focus on design and a little bit of the assets creation. It's kind of just allows you to kind of get in there. But the most important thing is just the games you play and the games that you really enjoy and the games that you keep playing that you maybe are using other people's mods that you want to improve on. Because the cool thing about the modding community is most of those mods, they're open source. You can just take them and make whatever changes you want to them. for me personally, one of I made a mod recently, or last year, because I was playing a lot of Company of Heroes 2, and I played a lot of Company of Heroes 1, and I was playing that. One of my friends messaged me like, "Why don't you play Company of Heroes 2?" I'm like, "Well, it's I kind of just prefer the first one because I like the artillery in this one. You can zoom out a lot more for some reason in Company of Heroes 2. The camera is locked in pretty close, and just being that zoomed in, just I didn't like it too much." And then he's like, "Well, there's modding for it," and I'm like, "Oh." Light bulb
I
across my
can
head.
go fix
So
that.
Well, let me get my keyboard then.
And yeah, and it's we just started playing Company of Heroes 2 together. I'm like, let me just see if I can fix all this. And I made a mod that removed. There was mods that did what we want, but there was none of them combined together. So what we wanted is, remove the population cap. Like, who cares? I want as many units as possible. My computer can handle it. It's an old game. We want to remove the general mechanic because we don't really care about having generals around. So through the modding, I found out that I went and removed the population cap by setting it to 99, or 999. I removed you can disable the generals completely. As soon as the game starts, it's all just scripting. You just kind of remove them, and then you can modify the camera code. And I went in there, and there's a like FOV sliders, and there's zoom out scale. You can change it all. So now I've just set that so I can zoom out all the way, and all of a sudden it just became like one of my favorite games. I want to see how much I've played. I think I put like 40 hours into it last year, which doesn't seem like a lot, but for how my schedule was, it was quite a bit of time I was sinking into it.
Yeah, because you had like 2 minutes a day to yourself between work and school.
Yeah. I would throw it on, play a bit, save, go to the next. But it just there's a kind of game mode in there that we like to play as well. There's a map editor, so all the maps we play are like choke point maps where it's like a single bridge and it's just you and the other enemies have to cross this bridge. And what we'd always do is just build as much defense and artillery because it was just super satisfying to just call artillery on a never-ending wave. It's basically just turned into like a wave defense game with all these big tanks coming at you, and you have to build your defenses. But the AI had a bug where if it went so and so long, it just realized that it was hopeless, I guess, and would just not attack you anymore. Or if you blocked off a road, so like it seemed like what they would do is just like right click in your base and do attack. And if you blocked it off so their pathing couldn't get there, they would stop coming. So you could also modify the AI and modify behavior. So I set in, found out when the AI would break and fix that. So it just always maintained that aggression that I liked, which is really cool because I haven't really had too much time to do game dev while I've been working in school. And it just allowed me to, make that game. And it didn't require too much programming knowledge. It's if you have, the drive for it, you'll be able to figure it out.
Or ask.
Yeah, or ask. It was, like forums. It was all forums. Like I got the documentation. I think I posted some of the docs in our Discord when I was working on it because it was just like in all caps, "Do not use this method," with no explanation to why not.
I remember that.
Part of me's like, I kind of want to know. Or
hold on, let me just call this and see what happens. I mean, it literally is the equivalent of having a big red button with a sign, "Do not push." I know my first thought is, what happens?
What if I do push it?
And I can't. I never called it. Maybe I should go see what happens. It probably just crashes.
Probably deletes your hard drive.
But even for people who don't have a programming background, or maybe don't have some of those skill sets yet, or even if it's something you want to do with like kids, you can mod board games. There's not really any barrier to entry to modding board games. You can make custom pieces, you can make custom rules, make custom boards. You can then even branch that into making your own entire game,
as you've seen us do in not a lot of time.
And it's just like step by step. It's if you don't have any, like, if you want to just get into game design, that's one of the best ways to do it is, modify existing board games. How can you improve them? What are changes or assets? If you don't have digital art, you can, update cards. You can make custom print of cards, which happens for, Magic the Gathering and Pokemon and all this stuff. Some people like to make their own custom arts for cards.
Yep. I'll leave you with before I've got other things I've got to pull up and work on for like giveaway, but I did want to talk about the mod that we came up with, friends came up with for GoldenEye to make it interesting after putting 1,000 hours into the multiplayer and you still want to play more. For those that know it, it was temple level. I'm sure you all know the temple level. Okay.
Very familiar.
The weapon choice was grenades. You weren't allowed to use anything but grenades. It was extremely frowned upon to the point where you would get sat on and punched in the arm as a punishment for trying to fire a weapon during the game. Grenades only, and you're not allowed to throw them. All you can do is cook it and chase the guy.
Very explosive version of tag.
It started with some of my best friends were twins, and he turns around and sees his brother standing behind him and starts firing at him with one of the rifles because he's in a corner, and his brother's just laughing while getting shot, and as he's wondering, why is he laughing at me, his brother explodes, killing both of them in the corner. And from that moment, the game mode lived. And it was great because you could play it all night until you decided to end the game. And the person who wins is the person whose score is closest to 0.
Yep.
It was so much fun. I laughed for hours and hours and hours playing that game. And it's so terrifying. You just see a guy running at you and you're like, is it already cooking? I better run.
How much time do I have?
I have to turn around and run. He can't catch up to me. And you move at the same speed he does. So it's like, who cuts the corners the best? Yes. Much fun. If you get a chance to play it, I recommend trying it. It's good
I'm trying to
laughs.
think of other games, even modern ones, that we could apply that to a multiplayer. Just the grenade tag. One topic I forgot for games to start with, Halo's Forge system was actually pretty great. They allowed for a lot of custom game modes to be made and added a whole lot of replayability. And that's kind of a good way. I'm assuming Infinite. I don't remember. My experience was with 3 for the most part. That was where like all my custom game modes were being created and played through. I'm assuming they kept Forge the same way. I see a lot of kind of stuff online with like the race courses that get made. But yeah, just try to come up with, you can get some friends together, just try to come up with something new, something fun, or take something that's, already a custom game mode and try to improve it, or, play something. And if you're interested in game design, try to do an analysis on it and say, okay, well, what parts didn't you like? What improvements can be made? And then see if you can implement those improvements and see if they work or not.
I'd really like...
Did Snap Map ever actually become a thing in Doom 2016? Because I know they were selling the whole concept of Snap Map as like here's a quick and easy way for everybody to be able to make your own levels. But I don't know if that ever actually happened.
And I mean, not just video games, even, card games and stuff. I'd love to hear some of the creative stuff. I'd love to hear new ideas. Pseudo mentioned the free parking house rule in Monopoly. He didn't mention the house rule of Monopoly that almost every person I've ever played with has included, and that's removing the auctioning of a property. Right.
Yeah, we also do that.
Nobody plays with that rule. It makes the game take so much less time.
For those who don't know, the term house rule just means like rules that are in our house, and you'll find that a lot when you play board games as a kid. You would go to a friend's house to play, and then their family just plays an entirely different version, either due to them maybe misreading the manual, which has happened to me a few times. You play a board game for years and years, and turns out we just didn't read about a mechanic, or they just found a style that they like, and that's what they do. And this is all over the place with the games, like pool, like billiards. A lot of people have different ways to play billiards. What constitutes as a foul? Are you allowed to place the ball anywhere? Do you have to call every pocket? All that kind of stuff. And a lot of them aren't baked into rules. Sometimes they do get baked into rules for certain tournaments. But a lot of times it's just custom kind of game modes to add flavor because it adds life to the game. Magic the Gathering, I'm thinking about now, is Commander and Conspiracy were they official ones created by Wizards, or were those ones that kind of got
Commander is a really, really cool story. So Commander started out as EDH, Elder Dragon Highlander, which means it wasn't created by some corporate schlob. And it was actually created by the judges who judge big GP tournaments. They live the game. Like, to pass a test to qualify as an MTG judge is no joke. And there's 3 ranks to those tests. Like, I could maybe pass first rank. And I know my rules. I know my rules really, really well. That's why I could maybe pass first rank. Second and third get like into really, really crazy tournament-only situations with multiple ties, and how do we determine it? It's really crazy, crazy levels. So these guys are that into the game. They made their own way to play, and they would get together after the tournaments and play this way together, and the players at the tournaments eventually caught on to what the judges were doing and started joining in with them, and it was just such a fun way to play the game that it caught on.
That's really cool. Because I didn't know the history of it. I thought about it. It just kind of popped in my head. I'm like, wait, those are game modes, but I don't really see the official. Like, eventually they might get officially supported, but a lot of those things are kind of like they start off with those kind of house or custom rules, and it's cool to see it. It's not just a video game thing. It's just all games. Anything you can kind of just mod and add flavor to, or just improve or create something new out of existing frameworks.
Dungeons and Dragons and Pen and Papers as well have a wealth of a history of house rules on how people play those games. It says right in the book that the GM should determine what rules he wants to use and not to make his own game out of it.
My favorite is, okay, I shoot an arrow and I go to mark 1 arrow away, and it's like, we don't do that here. It's fine. We'll just a lot of sessions I play were just you're a ranger. We're not going to worry about the arrows. Let's just not think about it. We've got the Legolas mod in where you just never run out of arrows. Stuff like that. I find it is smart. They say it's GM's call, because there are people who would much rather prefer to play with, you have to manage your arrows and make sure you have everything you need for an encounter. And there's a lot of people, especially when you're starting, that can be overwhelming, and you just want to shoot an orc in the face and be like, yeah, got him. So it's nice to have that flexibility and, be able to implement house rules.
Absolutely. I mean, it's games, right? Games are about having fun, not following the rules to a T. They're about having fun. I mean, you have to follow the rules that are established, but if the rule makes the game less fun, just take the game and rule out. Play the game without it. Bam.
D&D 4.0.
How to have fun in D&D 4.0. Play 3.5.
Play 5 instead.
Well, 5 wasn't out at the time, so when 4 came out, if you wanted to have fun, you play 3.5.
Yeah. Although I did really like a lot of the choices they made in 5 being a lot more flexible, as far as like letting the DM essentially just make their story inside the system. And the way I describe it is you get to play an action movie rather than like trying to figure out how precisely this one interaction works for 30 minutes. And then your wizard just goes, no, I'll just cast Arcane Missile instead.
I really like...
excuse me, you mispronounced Fireball?
True. No, that's your Warlock.
Well, Magic Missile. You got to cast Magic Missile of the Darkness. It's the only way to play D&D. But I like 5e quite a bit. I like it just for it's a bit more approachable, and like for DMs, advantage is really cool. And inspiration, I think it's the mechanic called, where if someone does something that you like in the game, if they're role playing well, if they make a good decision, you can give them inspiration, which allows them to do an advantage and use advantage on a roll, which is you roll 2 dice, take the highest one, which is super cool. It's a really good way to motivate that level of participation without forcing it through rules of the game.
Here's a house rule that I've included in all of my D&D campaigns that I've done that I got from the book of Old Shadowrun. And I was like, that's a great idea. I'm going to do this in every game I play now. And there was an old rule in that if a player, without leaving character, was able to make every person in the game burst into laughter, free point of karma. That is how Zug Zug got so strong. That is the one rule that fueled his power. Turns out when you play a character lower than 1 int, he's funny.
Especially if you can play him well. It's cool. Like, and then sometimes you'll find systems that, were there for a reason, and it's kind of nice to learn from a game design. Like, I think one of the last times I played D&D, I was, like, typically you're rolling a bunch of D6 and then taking some away. And then one of my friends like, why can't we just like roll D20? I'm like, well, that's some high risk, high reward stuff, right? Like a 1 is going to be brutal, whereas if you roll like a bunch of D6 and take a minimum amount of them, you're guaranteed to at least get 4 or 5 as your worst case scenario. He's like, well, can I just do it? I'm like, yeah, okay, let's, because I was expecting 1s and 2s, and so his first roll is a 20 and then like a 19.
You're not allowed to do this anymore.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, you know what? We're just gonna roll with it because it's his first time playing. It's just probably gonna be hilarious. So he played a barbarian with just like 20 strength, with all the dwarf added to it was like 25, and I'm like, yeah, there's like no door that can stop you, so you can just do whatever.
That was Zug Zug.
It just like luckily like it was fun for them, and it was just you as a DM you just can make the modifications you need to okay, well we'll make things a bit more range, so he's got to work for it a little bit, but when he gets up there he can just grab someone by the legs, and now he's got he's grabbing someone who's also holding a weapon, so he smacks them.
He's done a blunt.
And
Look
then
at me. You are my weapon now.
It was like,
I actually played a character that was the whole premise of the character.
Our approach to it was that he picked up my dwarf and threw my dwarf at the enemy, and then when I ended up on the other side of the enemy after being thrown, we flank them and get advantage.
yeah.
It worked really, really well.
And sometimes you just gotta hit a motherfucker with another motherfucker. Like that's just gotta happen.
Yep. With Zug Zug, I had a natural strength boost because I played him below 1 int because I was like, I want to be the strongest, dumbest person on the planet in the game. And in order to facilitate that, my GM just came up to me. He's like, you know what? You play your character as sub 1 intelligence because he should at least be able to talk properly even at 1 intelligence with game systems. So I'm just going to give you a bonus to strength, but whatever you say is what he does. So if I were to say, I go through the door, I would go through the door. I had to be very literal. Like, I open the door and go through it. That's what was required of me. So if I ever got excited, I was just like, you leave holes behind you. I got a lot of free laugh experience with that character. I want to make another one of those.
One of the ones I was playing with another DM, it got really silly because so like sometimes people won't take it too seriously. You don't always have to scold them. You can kind of just let them go bad, or like let them kind of fail, and then be like, yeah, there's rules here for a reason. But one of my weirdest examples was, for some reason, my friend wanted to be a 10-foot tall giant potato. I don't know why, but that's ended up happening. Just fought for it. It's like, yeah, fuck it, whatever. This is what you are. Immediately goes into a pub, and just starts beefing people, and then starts a bar brawl and just gets absolutely destroyed because he's a level 1 potato. And so that happens, and he dies. And then when the actual campaign starts with everyone else we meet up, we walk into the bar, and the DM just goes, you walk into the bar and notice there's mashed potato everywhere. No one really seems to be concerned or caring about it. Some people are, cleaning up, but there's just mashed potato everywhere. And it was just hilarious. And eventually he re-rolled as an elf, but it was nice little start to the campaign. It's walking into the mashed potato everywhere.
Yeah, I've absolutely been mean to a few players here and there to help them learn the rules at the beginning. It helps. I learned the hard way, not from myself, friend of mine. Never name yourself the Goblin Killer as a level 1 character.
Because you will die to goblins.
Yep, my buddy was like, no, I'm this guy, the Goblin Killer. He wrote this whole backstory about how he killed a goblin, so I threw a goblin at him as soon as he walked into the town, and it killed him, and that was the end of that character. Oh, good times.
Or you can be like my character Evie and get very lucky at low levels and become the Goblin Killer.
Yes. Wait to earn your nicknames in games, unless you're starting at a higher level and you've played them a bunch. But then you don't need to listen to us. You probably already know what you're talking about. Hopefully,
I wanna play D&D.
probably not. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, maybe we should just start up D&D streams.
Sunday
Good.
D&D streams. That's something I've wanted to do for a while.
We have the technology.
We can do it. And now we've got this lovely video set up where I've got crisp video and audio and individual spots, and we can green screen and actually do it. Actually do it. So if people start twisting my rubber arm, maybe we'll do it. Probably not though.
You can just do like a one shot or two, test it out.
Yep.
Those are pretty fun. You know, just start off with level 5s or heist. I find heist one shots are really fun. You're playing like a bunch of rogues.
Yep.
And it's like you got really cool stuff along that.
I've also done some PvP arenas to just let players duke it out with each other's characters and see who comes out alive. Maybe we can bet channel points on it. Because they have the channel point gambling system now.
So fun with PvP one shots. It turns out that Fireball does a lot of damage, but it doesn't work very well when you're in a very small arena.
I didn't ask you how big the room is. I said I cast Fireball. I've heard that before. That's never what you want to hear from your mage, by the way.
I'm very
hey, it worked out fine when Corvin cast Fireball on his feet. All right.
I cast Fireball at what? Me.
That was still one of my highest damage turns ever. I think that was like 515 or so damage in that one turn.
maybe that's a panel we can do is a designing a one shot, and then we can play it. It's still on topic for mods. Yeah, we could spend a couple hours.
We'll talk about it, because if we're gonna actually do the idea that's been come up with in stream, it might be good for the players not to know what's all going on in the story and the history in it. But I'd be willing to work on something with you guys for a few hours and throw it together and then show them what we've been able to put together in that time. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Well, and we could also do, but we don't have to do the whole thing on stream. We can pick, specific parts of modules to get chat out and kind of, maybe we go through one character. We make an NPC. We make
take
a town,
some chat input. Yeah.
make an encounter, make a bit of a quest, and kind of go through like kind of the one shot, but leave a lot of it kind of behind. And maybe we can even open it up to chat can create a character that one of us will play.
Yep. Yeah, I'm open to those ideas. I really like it when we do the chat improv stuff and take ideas from chat and make it off of that. So that's absolutely something we can do. And we're getting close to end time. So what do you say we just grab some names and give some stuff away and then give my voice a rest?
Yeah, time to give away some video games.
There's more in the list. There's always more in the list. And Pseudo, if you actually want me to add yours to the list, you should send them to me.
Yeah, I grabbed this and then got distracted.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
Don't forget, there is a one-liner in the game giveaway channel. It's pinned to the channel. That if you hide all of your already redeemed keys in your Humble Bundle library, it will just grab all of the remaining ones for you.
Does it work well with the Humble Choice?
I don't know.
I keep paying for Humble Choice and then only grabbing like one or two games.
It's everything that shows up under keys and entitlements is going to be grabbed by it. So for me, it's not very good either, because there's lots of stuff that's like game dev bundles for software, and I definitely had to weed it out a little bit. And Raven, with the first name, congratulations, sir.
Probably watching hockey.
Probably. And another Christo. His Habs are beating my Canucks, so he's most likely watching it.
Oh, Raven's here.
Oh, indeed. I haven't rolled what game yet, but I rolled your name and a Babowski. I don't know if you're watching, but I know where to find you. I have the technology. Get my skip tracers on it, track you down, give you, hey, Raven, you should come play this with us sometime. I'd love an excuse to do this online a little bit more, because I do want to play it more with Rage and Pseudo, because I want to get a little better. Well, that's a game that we were just talking about. It's a mod game.
Very relevant and also a very good game.
A very good game, too.
For Christo, Sanctum 2. I don't know what that is.
I think that's a tower defense. Yeah. I played the first one. It was actually pretty good.
It's like a first-person shooter tower defense, and it's multiplayer.
And for Babowski, a painful platformer. Oh, painful. Oh, Strider.
It's not that painful. It's pretty good.
It's a good game. It's just not easy.
Yeah, true.
That's what I mean by painful. You're going to die. You're playing Strider, you're going to die. A lot. I've seen people play it that are good at it. They die a lot. I think that's the 3D one, but I think it's still good. I don't think Strider has really bad games to its name.
It's 3D rendered, but strapped the Z index to a certain value.
Yeah. I know it plays 2D, but it's the 3D rendered version of it. There's nothing wrong with 3D rendered strapped to 2D playing. That's a perfectly fine way to make games. And it makes it simpler in ways. Oh, the backlog, that's what that is. Yes, I'm going to actually get back to Project Wingman. I promise. I haven't even had time to do any grinding in it to try to get that ship with 60 missiles.
Flashback to that render I made.
Yeah, that was pretty wonderful. Thank you for that render. If you're wondering what we're talking about, watch last week's video and just skip forward to the missile plane.
The best thing about it is I made it with actual particles, so if you play the animation, it shoots them all at once.
Perfect.
You just see another plane made out of missiles literally flying around until it hits them.
I want this in a game now. I want to see just a plane shape of individual missiles flying at something and colliding with it. That's just wonderful. But that's for another time. I hope you've learned something about game mods. I hope if you're inspired to do it, you go and do it and show us what you've been working on. And hey, ask questions when you're stuck, because if it's the first time you're doing it, you're going to be stuck. And the easiest way to get unstuck is join a community and ask some questions. So jump on in, join us. There's always fun stuff being built in the Discord by numerous teams. Definitely come check it out. So until I get to see you, I hope, I'm not going to say I'm going to be streaming Monday or Tuesday. I need to wait for the specialist appointment. I need to make sure I'm properly over this before it just flares up again. I've dealt with it twice. Dealing with it the third time sounds like too much. But I will keep you updated on my next stream. At the very least, we will be back next week with more game reviews. Game reviews next week. They are... Let me just check my notes so I don't give bad information. Yakuza 0 and Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. 2 games absolutely worth talking about. So I hope to see you then. Until next time, I'm Deus.
I'm Rage.
And I'm Pseudo.
And may all your shots be headshots.